Welcome everyone to a special episode of In Check with FinTech, organized by PCN. My name is Rogier Roepen van der Voort, and today we have a special series of the podcast as well as in a video version. We'll be talking about the European Payment Initiative in the next 3 episodes. I won't be doing that on my own. I'm joined for today, for the first part, by Carsten Wengel from G+D, Vlado Galevski from Netcetera, and Marcus Nasarek from eTonec. Welcome, guys.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Just to maybe before we start, give a kind of a short introduction on EPI, because a bit of a timeline. Back in July 2020, it was announced that a group of 16 major European banks from 5 of the Euro countries announced that they would launch the EPI with the aim to create a unified payment solution for consumers and merchants across Europe. Now, today there's 31 banks already, amongst which Deutsche, there's ING, BNP, Santander, and also 2 third-party acquirers, being Nets and Worldline. So a lot has happened in those, almost a year. But what is API exactly? What is it looking to achieve? What will make it successful? These are just some of the questions that we'll be discussing in this exclusive 3-part series in cooperation with G+D and Netcetera. Marcus, would you like to start with an introduction of yourself?
I can start. Thank you. Thank you very much. So my name is Marcus Nasarek. I have 2 decades at least experience in banking and payments. I was working for a bank, then even for an association of banks with all regulatory background, then working for a while for PayPal. So I also know the payments in Europe, responsible for the wallets, what comes in and out of the wallet in the sense of payments and card. And then I have my own company as a consulting business in that area.
Good to be discussing this today with you. Vlado, welcome as well. Can you give an introduction as well?
Thank you, Rogier. So my name is Vlado Galevski. I am leading the commercial and distribution team for Netcetera. And I have been basically working in this segment for the past 10 years. And adding to that, I'm a payment and blockchain and crypto enthusiast, and looking forward to bring value to this discussion. Thank you.
Carsten, welcome.
Yes, hello. Thanks for having me here. My name is Carsten, joining from Galevski and Darien, a 168-year-old fintech in payment business. We have been basically working on payment for all these times, and my role is actually leading the payment business globally from a sales and distribution perspective on behalf of G+D, and that includes basically everything what we do on classical payment with cards, but also digital payments, tokenization, and things like this. And of course, our group is much larger because we also still produce cash, and quite a lot of that. And we will come to this topic, I think, later in the discussion.
Absolutely, yeah. Great. All right. Well, again, welcome, guys. And to kick things off, let's talk maybe specifically about EPI, kind of what the current retail payment landscape in Europe looks like. Marcus, would you like to give us an overview?
Yeah, it's a very interesting development if you look back 20 years, because still after all these work on harmonized payment framework, legal framework on payments, and all what is done with the SEPA, it's still very fragmented. When I was first involved quite long ago, when SEPA came up and the discussions were, okay, now we have a harmonized framework on the data formats, how should we move into the market? How should we make payments easier, digital payments easier, mobile payments easier? There was a lot of hope, and so that is even 15 years ago when this discussion started and when we looked into innovations in that field. And still, even if it is a huge effort to put, let's say, SEPA as a harmonized framework into the market, but still then kind of further development stuck somehow, because really payments in a sense of online or mobile payment, they didn't really evolve over the time. And so we have still in the retail market very many different ways of implementing or realizing retail payments.
Oh, so there's a clear demand for unification, basically.
Exactly.
I mean, on that note, Vlado, what do you see that API wants to achieve or change right now?
You know, it's really interesting that Marcus mentioned SEPA as an example, and I think SEPA is an excellent example and an excellent initiative. But you know, among payment aficionados, there is the running joke that SEPA, which stands basically for the single euro payments area, actually stands for sending European payments to America, and this is a known joke. And this is actually referencing the absolutely enormous share of wallet which the US networks and basically the US payment providers have. So if you take a look at some statistics for, these are already old, I think 2019 or 2020, you have the vast majority of the total transactions within the EU zone, then including UK, which is around 260, 270 billion, were divided between Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal. And I think around 15 billion, so not even 7%, 7-8% are or were between the three biggest national schemes in Germany, so Girocard and Carbon Care and Swish in Sweden. So when we ask ourselves, like, what does EPI bring? First and foremost, it brings consensus. So I think what differs now in regards to the European Payment Initiative compared to other initiatives in the past, like Monent and some other initiatives, is the wide consensus between the stakeholders. So we have 16, I think actually not 16 in the meantime, almost 30 major banks supporting the initiative, which is a huge momentum. It's not only that, you have the ECB, you have the technical stakeholders, you have the integrators. So there is a very wide consensus that this needs to happen. Yeah? And if you ask me, it's way overdue. It's absolutely way overdue. We have relied for a very long period of time to have such a big influence on the payments ecosystem from various different players, or let's say the majority of them are in the US. So we need to really rethink that. And you know, this is as well very interesting. So that's kind of what is EPI longing to achieve. It is longing to kind of bring a bit of balance in this geopolitical sense. Yeah? So, and why is that? You know, it completely makes sense. So if you take a look, we have very strong national schemes across Europe. But who is the actual competition, or who are the actual influences if we take a look at on a geopolitical stance? On one side, we have China with a very advanced program with the digital yuan and their CBDC program. On the other side, we have US with their absolute dominance on the scheme side, but as well on the fintech side with PayPal on the fintech side, and the announcement of CBDC on theirs, and as well the BigTech. So, like, we are really, from a geopolitical sense, absolutely needing to do that. So, if you take a look at these national schemes, you know, we are speaking always at the that in order for this to make sense, it needs to have kind of the economy of scale. Okay, and if you take a look at Girocard in Germany, it makes sense for Germany. Carbon Care in France, but if we take a look at who the competition is, it absolutely makes sense for a unified pan-European harmonization of the national schemes. So yes, so I think that these two elements, the geopolitical sense and basically the operational, the pan-European harmonization of the whole landscape of payments, are the two most important points that EPI wants to solve and wants to improve.
Great. All right. Okay. Let's talk maybe a bit then about those key stakeholders. You already mentioned some of them, Vlado, banks, the domestic schemes, the merchants and the consumers. Carsten, how would the EPI impact those stakeholders?
Well, as you already said, it's quite an ecosystem that we are trying to renovate here. And it's actually more than renovation. I think it's more like a surgery at an open heart. So it will affect all organs, no? And if you look at the payment ecosystem, of course you have the issuing bank at the forefront for serving the customers in Europe. So the customers are then the second, because they should all feel and see, hey, there's something different coming, something new, something potentially better than what is currently there, coming from all the different international schemes that Vlado has just talked about. That means that the domestic schemes, especially France and Germany, are notably quite affected, because they have actually quite successfully developed national schemes just because they wanted these dominant players from the outside also not to enter so strongly. And I'm being German, and I'm using also the Giro card and the Secos system myself quite a lot. I can see this. I mean, this is quite significant, especially now also in the pandemic, how these Giro cards have been used, right? And the amount of card usage, especially here, going up, and the merchants all accepting it. So quite successful. Now, this putting on the European level is quite a change. And that means the local schemes will need to give up some of the things that they have acquired in the past. Now, and last but not least, the merchant, right? The merchants need to accept it, a new EPI scheme, because if they don't do it, then nothing is won. Take a look, and it's a good example, when Apple Pay was launched. It was not so successful because Apple Pay all of a sudden had a nice, cool gadget that everybody could wear around. No, it was successful because they had Macy's and different other stores in the United States already lined up, and they were all willing to accept Apple Pay. That made it successful. So you need to build this ecosystem, and that's why all of these key stakeholders are involved and will play a very significant role in the question, will it be successful or not?
Makes sense. So talk a bit more about those banks then. I mean, it is somewhat of a private initiative of the banks. Like I said in the beginning, it started with 16 banks of 5 countries. Now it has increased to 31. What's the political context like that is around EPI?
And by the way, it's not only banks. We also have processors in there, like Worldline and Nets, for example, right? So also the backend component, you could say, is also already being participating. Now, we have to notice that EPI really is currently a commercial initiative, right? There's an EPI interim company, which was founded in Belgium last year. And this interim company is now basically shaping the whole approach to generating this new European payment initiative. However, there have been remarks and comments by the European Commission and by the European Central Bank as well, because both constituents also say we need to protect and also build the European sovereignty when it comes to payment. Now, there are different means of doing this, and EPI is one means of doing this. So already last year, there were public statements by the European Central Bank and by the European Commission publicly supporting and endorsing the approach to European unified and harmonized payment scheme going forward. That, of course, is more a statement. It doesn't mean that they are currently, to my knowledge, financially vested in this overall project. But at least what we can say is that this is seen as a thing that where also the European leaders say it makes sense. It makes sense to create also this initiative going forward. It will have not only positive effects on the payments side, but also maybe on European economy. And we come, I think, later to the topic when we discuss also the benefits for Europe. But from this perspective, I think it's a good that Europe is really supporting this initiative, and that gives it also some momentum and also some pressure, again, to be successful.
Yeah, because I think the 2 biggest economies, obviously France and Germany, they need to be on board, right? In order to make this potential.
Well, it's almost a common standard now that if you want to get things done in Europe, you need Germany and France on board. Luckily, both of them are, right? And they are also on the scheme side here. If you look at the technicality a little bit, CPACE is more or less already an agreed standard that all would actually buy into. So there are also some foundation layers on some technical components here already set. But for sure, they will be the powerhouses. And if you look at the banks contributing, all the big names from Germany and France are participating. But also, notably, Spain is quite strong with BBVA and Santander, and of course, some other banks as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, step by step, more and more banks come on board and see the relevance, which is very interesting, I think, for such a big initiative in order for it to be successful. I mean, talking about the ECB as well, Marcus, there's obviously also the digital euro. Would this compete with the EPI or not?
Yeah, that is obviously something very interesting, and very interesting connection, because if you look now, what is the next 5 to 10 years, you can't think without kind of at least distributed things. Let's distributed ledger, let's say blockchain, or let's say cryptocurrencies. Something of it has to be in your game, because that's the way how the big industry sectors, and even the big economies already kind of working. I have seen stuff now going up in Asia, what China is doing, what their next blockchain infrastructure for the industry is, how the supply chains there work, what Samsung does already since years. And we had the first discussions 2015 or something. Yeah, 2015, we were whiteboarding in the Association of German Banks and said, okay, oh, there's something coming. What is the thing? And the point was not that it's digital, because the euro eventually is somehow already digital for a very long time. So what's the thing in the discussion? But the point was these value chains become much, much shorter if people can trust each other in a different way. And because you now can put smart things into it, so that's the next step, to be honest. When you can do this smart contract stuff with your currency transactions, you can bind the underlying business into conditions of payment, what is a big part of payment service providers already now. But now think in this, you can do this fully automated, trustworthy, and you put much more business logic into the payment itself. So that was actually the very first beginning, the discussions. And I think the ECB may take a step back and say, let's first start with something what is digital, and then we can think about smart contracts. Actually, the same way eventually also DM or Facebook thinks, let's first do a transaction and then think about smart contracts and that stuff, because it is very complicated what comes up. But I think that is the space where you have to connect the dots now. From the ECB, your digital euro thing, make it secure and trustworthy, and then come from the payment retail side with their requirements to actually be able to use this. But there's still a long way to go, I think. So now I have my wallets and I have my Bitcoins, and I think, oh, very nice. And I hope that everything works well, because even a cold wallet isn't what it is promised somehow, sometimes. So there is something necessary as infrastructure elements. You need to have more professional parts of taking care of this routing and security and all that parts, because that is, I think, a long way to go, maybe in the next years, to make it more reliable, available, and resilient. And I think these are the points we have to solve. Yeah. And that's eventually why the ECB says, okay, let's make things simple first, start from there. And in the meantime, EPI could already clean up the table with making things nice and arrange payments, merchants, and doing all the customer experience very well. And then you have in the background, you have to connect the dots and putting the things together. But you have to be open for that, because I think otherwise it would be very hard to say, oh, now I have a very nice PayPal too, but but the world is different now. So what should I do? So I think that's a very good opportunity right now to do the things right. It's the right moment to start with that.
Yeah. Carsten, would you agree?
I just would like to add, first of all, I think we have to notice that both EPI from the private sectors and EZB digital euro have both the same target, European sovereignty. So that's the first striking thing that's really in common. Now, I have to tell you, when I talk to banks today, there's quite some tension on this topic, right? Because some banks say, well, is not the digital euro taking something away from me? What's going to happen with my business model? Is there something that I may lose in the process? And others see rather this as an opportunity, because it can include a digital wallet that you may already offer now with a EZB digital euro wallet on top of this, and they can both connect. And there are also use cases to be seen here in the collaboration. We as G+D and also here with Netcetera, I think we are looking at this really quite holistically. We have As I mentioned earlier, we are still producing cash. How do we do this? Well, we are working with 150 central banks in the world. Overall, we need to think of CBDC, central bank digital currencies, and EPI not as competing with each other, but rather there's going to be a collaboration with both schemes, and they can both ignite really a fire of innovation with the European companies contributing to this. And we are coming here to the table because we want to be part of this party.
But that's actually just another thing on this, because that was very, I'm just, when you mentioned, yeah, banks were discussing this. Actually, we had this discussion because as a prototyping company, we had the discussions even already 2 years ago. How would we convert bank applications like lending or guarantees or letter of attorneys into something digital on a blockchain-based thing? And that is exactly your point. There are so many things only a bank can do. What doesn't just exist if you have a cryptocurrency? That doesn't help you at all. It just makes you carrying around a number. But
I don't think you will take you will get a mortgage from the European Central Bank in the future.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Or a guarantee for, or let's say a deposit for your flat, because that was also very nice applications on the retail market where you want to put deposit for renting a flat. How would you do this? You put money into something, but you could also do digital currency stuff that is fully automated, regulated. But a bank is necessary to speak and to talk this guarantees and this responsibility.
Yes.
Vlado, anything to add to this?
So I think that although it's a pity because as Marcus and Carsten already said, on the actual finance side, there is a multitude of applications that you could build upon, even a private blockchain using this decentralized finance and so on, which could be really state of the art. You know? So, and on the other side of the digital euro, I think once again, the actual digital, let's call it like this, the digital euro has been with us for a while now, not in the form that it will be in the next 3 years, but we have had tokenized assets or tokenized money for sometimes in our wallet. The difference between let's say the digital euro and the tokenized assets is only under the hood. Yeah? So the actual front end, the customer will have a very similar payment experience, obviously very different when it's cross border, but like they will have a wallet and they will have a euro. The only difference is that it will be tokenized and it will be in their wallet and it's not going to be in a database in a bank somewhere. Once again, and I think there on the digital euro and on the CBDC, we are once again seeing that we are lagging behind as a community, as EU, as Europe, behind what is already happening. You have China looking at, since 2014, at basing a digital version of the digital yuan basically on not on distributed ledger. It's a very centralized version, but in any case, they have an actual production pilot right now in almost 50 provinces already. Yeah? You have Singapore basing a digital currency on a private blockchain. You have Hong Kong basing. So you have a multitude of countries that are already working on this. And I think we have a long way to go. But in any case, I do think that both ecosystems are compatible, both ecosystems are important and are bringing, at the end of the day, what we want to see, and that's sovereignty in the payments landscape and ecosystem.
So are they competing? No, they are rather complementing to each other. And one can serve as a catalyst for the other. That's very interesting. I mean, maybe to close things off, kind of overall opinion or position on the EPI on all of you would be interested to hear. Vlado, what's your overall opinion on the position of the EPI? Do you think it's a good thing?
Absolutely. I would even go a step further. I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's a necessary thing for us to survive in the geopolitical sense. And maybe survive is a bit of a strong word, but actually compete on one side with the strong geopolitical forces like US with their payment landscape and their schemes, China with the upcoming digital yuan, which will change a lot of things, which will change the way that, let's say, the US dollar is based, and it can actually jeopardize as well the dominance within the world payments ecosystem. EPI needs to happen. Digital euro needs to happen. And my personal view is that I think the best position that EPI officials can take is utilize local tech, is utilize European stakeholders who actually have a stake in this thing working.
Great. Carsten, do you feel the same?
No, I feel absolutely the same. And I would add to this, especially this topic of innovation and pushing this through also in Europe. I think EPI plus also the digital euro can be really a crystallization point of many different companies, innovators, startups, also maybe some longer lasting companies like us coming together and creating something new and developing something new, right? And giving innovation into this market. And that's also a strength then again for the European community, which if you look just at software development area is lagging far behind from the US or from China, right? So this is a good spark. I would also add for European citizens, once EPI is successful, it is rolled out, also digital euro, you name it, it's also an integration point for Europeans, for citizens living in Europe, right? Like when the euro was launched in 2002, I think it was when the first banknotes came out, right? It was also something, hey, we are belonging together, right? This sense of togetherness and developing something together, strengthening the economy, strengthening the resilience of European banks. What Vlado also alluded to here, those three elements I see really as strong points. So there's no question if we should do it, we have to do it, and we better accelerate.
Marcus, anything to add to that, in your opinion?
Yeah, I can only agree because that is so necessary, because just from the thoughts I had, what is money? Money, when I looked up, okay, money is something to understand, cryptocurrencies and all that stuff. So what is money? Money is relationships. It's not a thing by itself. Money doesn't exist. If you look into what fiat money is, then you come up with, it's the power of work or a power of an economy or whatever, but it is not a thing as such. So if you give up the way people pay to others, you are not part of these relationships anymore. And I think that's the thing for me. I was a few years ago in discussions when we discussed, should banks do payment? And I was a bit irritated and I thought, payment and banking is so different. Can they really do this? And yeah, for sure, because payment, it's banking, it's the same. It is not at all. Because you have to do, in payment, you have to manage risk, you have to manage relationships with merchants and customers, you have to do all this dirty work, call it that way. So you have to make your hands dirty, that's what I want to say. So maybe both, but at the end, it is really a very much and very close to to the people to live this relationship.
Money is relationships almost makes it sound philosophical, but indeed, I think the relationships between, like Carsten said, between the innovators, right, working together, companies like you guys really joining forces to build something which is also set up to be successful in the future. An integration point for Europeans, a unification of Europeans like we have with the euro. That's really interesting. Great, guys. Well, thanks for sharing your views, and thanks everyone for listening in or viewing this first part of the special podcast, videocast series together with G+D and Netcetera. I think we just touched the surface on EPI. So make sure to tune in next week again for part 2, where we'll look at more on a technical level what EPI may look like. We'll look at the use cases, some products, design and architecture. If you want to find out more, then you can go to either of our websites or LinkedIn's, and hope to see or hear you again next time. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.